David, how are you?
Beautiful, Leon. It's great to be here. Great to meet you.
Likewise. I'm just so grateful to see that big, beautiful smile on my screen and to be able to talk to you rather than have the joy of watching videos from the past where you've brought your glow to our community.
Oh, that's sweet.
I've thought to myself recently that it's probably a good idea that you don't ever do any retreats up in the Arctic Circle or anything because you might melt the ice caps and cause a global disaster because you
Oh
do.
my, it's the first time anyone said that on
Imagine you
the
walking
polar.
around in like a Hawaiian shirt and a pair of shorts,
Yeah,
and everybody else is in NASA clothes.
yeah. That's a great image.
It's come into my mind a few times in the last couple of weeks. I thought,
Mm.
yeah, that you beautiful glow. There's so many of us who absolutely love you, and I'm so grateful for what you've done. That's touched me, and I'm sure lots and lots of people just go, yes, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's beautiful to share from the heart. That's all we're doing. I think we're just doing a lot of heart-to-heart encounters, holy encounters and conversations. And wow, what a beautiful life.
Absolutely. So I normally make quite a few notes in the run up to talking to somebody, and I normally let guidance come through, and I will watch content and kind of align myself with somebody prior to having an interview so that I feel that I've received the right kind of guidance and thinking to engage and capitalize and maximize a connection during the Zoom time. But interestingly, with yourself, there was a sense of like not wanting to tether you and limit your understanding by not allowing a more of a freedom and a formlessness to what could potentially evolve through the chat. I did make a few notes where I said to myself, you wouldn't tell Jimi Hendrix what to play on the guitar. You wouldn't tell Pete Sampras how to play tennis, or Picasso how to paint, or Pele how to play football. So I thought, I equally don't want to kind of limit your expression of your understanding of the course because it is something that's so beautiful. And when I contacted you and sent an email asking whether it would be possible to do a podcast, I got an automated response, and it said that David's taking a step back and he's going to lead a blessed and devoted life for a while after 30 years of communicating and talking. And if there was a slight sadness to that message, it was something that a tinge in a nanosecond was dissolved and it was replaced with like, wow, I can't think of a more beautiful ambassador for the course who deserves that time away. And there was no sense of like, oh, I wasn't disappointed. And then, funnily enough, within an hour or two, I get an email from you going, "Hi, Leon, the podcast sounds like a lot of fun." It's like, wow, how amazing is that? You're taking this time out for you, which you really deserve. And I'm sure you wholeheartedly embraced it and got everything you deserve to get from that time. But equally, there you were within a couple of hours, and a number of emails come across, and I was just very touched. I thought, so typical of your beautiful nature. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's beautiful, Leon. I actually, toward the end of the summer, I had a couple people, you and another two friends that I've done some podcasts with before, who are both Spanish. They love to kind of delve into all the deep realms and have me on. I think I maybe did a couple podcasts, so that was kind of my. And you said, well, I think 14th or 19th, and we settled on the 14th here, and they wanted to do theirs on the 15th, so I went, okay, here we go, back to back. September, we're mid-September. Here it comes. It's opening up. So it all just I think it just shows itself, and that's what I love about everything is it just becomes very obvious, and I just laugh and go, okay, great, here we go.
In your beautiful glowing energy, did you come to the course? Like a lot of people, as myself included, you have people have a trauma to clear, and they have interference to our awareness of love's presence to get through. Or, as I'm sure you know better than anyone, people will have associations with organized religions to disassociate from in order to reframe a lot of the symbolism in our Christian terminology in the course. In your case, was there a trauma? Because I know the story of you as a young man deciding to follow the guidance to do the road trip, but I don't know. I thought that was something I'd like to ask you.
Well, I don't think, other than the unconscious trauma of unconscious ontological guilt, of believing that we could leave the source, which
Yeah.
actually we're being shown is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like an improbable trauma. It's a impossible trauma. And actually, for myself, I have a friend, Frances Zhu, who has.
Yeah.
She said, David, you really knew the course before you read it. Unlike most people, she said, I'm absolutely convinced, because of the rapidity that you kind of immersed into it. I considered mine was more of a solo journey at the beginning, and using the course like an oracle, and just deep prayer and meditation, and asking inner questions, and popping open the book more as an oracle than reading the book in a linear way. But
Mm.
then what the oracle would speak would be so enthralling, exhilarating, that I would go on probably for pages and chapters, just with one answer. So I read it many times, but not so much that many people read it chronologically, or
Yeah.
they will read that, rely on your inner guidance for which book, text, workbook,
Mm.
manual for teachers.
Yeah.
But with me using it as an oracle, I just kind of went into some very deep experiences. And then after some years, I just had three revelatory experiences where the world disappeared completely.
Mm.
And this goes back quite a ways. This was before the publication of The Disappearance of the Universe. I had three revelatory experiences where I was absolutely had direct communion with God, as Jesus says, a temporary. Revelation is a temporary, because the body would not long be maintained
Yeah.
if it was constant.
Sure.
But those were three like huge experiences. And then there were lots of mystical experiences in there, but those three direct experiences of God, kind of gave me an orientation which is a bit different than most Course in Miracles students or teachers, because I I had such a taste, you might say, even though they were temporary tastes. It was such a direct contact. It didn't even have symbols with it. It was just pure light, and everything else was gone. And so from that starting point, I started to use words like mystic and mysticism pretty naturally. And occasionally I would share some of these things in all my travels and gatherings. And sometimes I would have people that would come up after the gathering and go, oh my gosh, I never thought I would meet someone who had this experience, because I've been in the closet with it the whole time. Almost unspeakable and then the course says, yeah, it's not, you can't really explain it, you can't describe it. It's literally beyond the words. So it's no wonder that people feel like inadequate or wanting to go into the closet, like you said a bit, more low key, behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty direct thing, and I had the feeling that somehow with these revelatory experiences that my life was not under my personal direction and would unfold in a very miraculous way for a huge benefit. And I think the body of David was like 40 before somebody asked me about the spelling of my last name, and they were from Germany, and Meister, they said, meant master, and Hoff with two F's. They said that means hope in a certain part of Germany. So I was like, I would get these little flash bulbs of word symbols, master of hope. Wow. And I would think, wow, 40 years in the making, and that's one. Then people would say, how did you get the name David? And I said, well, that was my birth name that my parents gave me. And my mother's name was Evelyn, which is the long version of Eve. And my father's name was John, which, of course, the Gospel of John is kind of an interesting of the four Gospels, because John was so close to Jesus. And then my sister, her first name and middle name were the parents of Jesus, Mary and Joe. And then different points. I think it was maybe a psychic said at one point, you were King David from the Bible. That Jesus came in the lineage of David in the Bible, and I was like, okay. One time I was with a group of dear friends that were very devoted for many, many years, and we were on the East Coast of the United States, and we met this man who had been married to a world-famous psychic, and she had passed away, and he was elderly, but he had a big sparkle in his eyes and twinkle in his eyes when he met me and the group of people that were traveling with me. And then he said, I like to use like a tuning fork and kind of tune into the ethers and do readings. Would any of you like a reading? And we were all like, well, sure, go ahead. And he started going around with this tuning fork. And I think everyone me and everyone I was traveling with, he would say, would you like to know if you were with Jesus back in the day? We were like, okay. And it was like, for all but one of us, we were all there. Wow. And then the one who wasn't was in a relationship with a woman who was one who was, and her head just kind of snapped when he said this little tuning fork, no, you were not a follower of Jesus. The partner kind of looked, and I said, yeah, you don't see you look like that every day on the dating game or anything. That was kind of a deep look. But I think it's all just symbols. Like I tell people with these near-death experiences, NDEs, or I call them near-life experiences, because they go to the light. You had a near-life experience. That's good. Amazing. Go through a tunnel and come near life, the light of heaven. So it was interesting, though. I would say, well, these are perceptual experiences, and everything that involves form is a perceptual experience. Even near-death experiences are just perceptual witnesses of the mind, almost like little images and scenes of what the mind is ready to accept. So a lot of times these NDEs can be quite loving and quite expansive, because they're coming much closer to the light, and they're almost like harbingers or forerunners. It's like a preface before awakening to the light. Yeah. So, yeah, for me, it was kind of interesting with the Course, because I had such a deep connection with with the author that I was very, very close. And then Jesus was saying, Jesus was saying, I'm the only one that can perform miracles indiscriminately because I completed my part perfectly. So now I can perform them indiscriminately, but you cannot. And he's quite emphatic that we need to be open with our miracle readiness and be really ready and willing, but that he will perform them through us, if we are ready and willing. And so, and also, I remember reading some of the material that was in Absence from Felicity, and then as different versions were published, where Jesus one time referred to Casey, meaning Edgar Casey, probably one of the most famous psychics and healers of all time, and just saying, Casey made a great contribution in the plan of awakening. It could have been far more helpful, Jesus said, if he had turned to me and asked me which miracles to perform. And that encapsulates a lot right there. With this, he's talking about Edgar Casey in that way. No one but Jesus could just throw it like a little footnote onto Edgar Casey's amazing lifetime. And so for me, it's just been a very deep, intimate experience, but I could see it was about happiness and joy and lightness. It wasn't about trying to bring another theology onto planet Earth. Jesus says even the coarsest theology will have to be forgiven and forgotten in order to experience the light. So that puts it in perspective, because many of us who adore the Course, we would say, wow, this is the best theology I've come across. This kind of takes the cake. But Jesus is saying, no, we're not here for the words. We're here to go beyond the words. We're here to go into a direct experience. And since I had my revelatory experiences, I was like, oh yeah, okay, that's it. I understand when he said the sole responsibility is to accept the atonement for yourself. He said it twice. And that's just a good word to kind of go at anything, because I would say that for those that practice the Course or even teach the Course, the responsibility thing comes up when the mind still is clinging to a responsibility involving linear time or the world, or a role, an occupation, a family role, anything like that. That's actually a block to the awareness of God's love. And so if our sole responsibility is to accept the atonement, it must be that we are to, through miracles, be convinced that, as Jesus says in the beginning principles, the 50 miracle principles, he says, you are a miracle. And that is really taking it and lifting even our ideas around miracles up to, he's bringing it back to our identity. He's saying, you're the Christ, and you'll never be satisfied. You'll never know lasting and true happiness until you're in the same environment in which you were created, which is heaven, which is spirit. So then you start to have that as a standard, like, okay, I'm not going to seek for happiness through externals. And that's a big one, because all of our past conditioning and programming is seeking for happiness in what he would call externals, the projected world. And that has to be really discovered. You can't just say that as a mantra and expect, to twinkle your nose or click your heels 3 times or something, and voila, it happens. It's something that it's like you really have to give your heart to it. And then when you do give your heart to it, then there's a lot of dismantling, a lot of seeming undoing, unwinding from a pretty strong investment in illusions to be pulled back to the point to be able to see them for what they are. That's the key.
Wow. Yeah, because it's been interesting to me of late thinking about the line, it says nothing as blinding as perception of form. And as we know, with the multi-interpretable, very purposeful language, again, almost as an offshoot to that thought, as I'm saying this to you, I'm thinking about how you're describing atonement and thinking of undoing and thinking just how perfect that word is, undoing, for removing our investment in the illusion, as you say. And then lately, there seems to have been a strong contemplation with this idea, for me personally, about nothing so blinding as perception of form, and how you can take that to different places. So you could say, you could say perhaps the initial engagement with that idea would be the form of Leon talking to the form of David, and for us here in this moment to be blinded by your separate self and my separate self. But in a sense, when Jesus is talking to us about God doesn't know what form is and the changeless reality of what we are, and how awareness is beyond form, I started to then sort of take this into my meditations and kind of watch the mind from a point of formless awareness, just present, just like breathing, trying to be empty-minded, and then watching the awareness falling into a thought form, and then falling into an imaginary ego scenario that's either projected forward in linear time or it's projected backwards to a memory in linear time. And then kind of like shaking my head and go, oh, you've fallen into the idea, you're watching a movie, the movie's so engaging that you forget and you think you're the central character in the movie. Then you kind of like, oh, no, I'm not. And you pull back out to watch the movie again. And then you fall in and then you come out and then you fall in. And it's actually, like it says in maybe chapter 30, we say decisions are continuous, you are constantly deciding whether or not to engage with this conceptual thinking, which is essentially form. And the language of formlessness is it's something, it's literally the opposite of what we're used to our minds doing every single split second, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It's beautiful. It's interesting that you mentioned that passage because in my travels around the world to these 44 countries, I did come across a man when I was down in New Zealand who was living in a bus with his wife and children, and he was a musician and a singer and a songwriter, and he wrote a song using that particular passage.
Wow.
And it was like nothing so blinding as a perception of form. The sight of form means understanding has been obscured. The goal of the curriculum, no matter what teacher you choose, is know thyself. There is nothing else. And his name was Ramon York. I remember he sent me a bunch of his CDs. Somehow that him and his wife and kids produced some CDs from inside of a bus. And it was very mystical. I was just like, oh, I would put that on. But the sight of form means that understanding has been obscured. So that's a key line that comes right after nothing so blinding as perception of form, because the Course is really teaching us that I do not understand anything I see. It's basically saying that as long as you think you understand, you are not going to have the motivation to be taught forgiveness, because the prior learnings, which Jesus tells us, you came to this world and you kept learning and overlearning an impossible curriculum and an impossible world, and never once paused to ask yourself, why am I doing this? He basically is saying that we've circumvented around the truth. We've circumscribed our awareness, our pinpoint awareness of the truth and the light, with layers and layers and layers of falsity, and that generates a false sense of understanding. So when we say the word I am a, and we put something after that, that's just the product of learning. So that means that it's more of a course in unlearning. So it's a kind of an interesting title. You know, this the title of your podcast is "May the Course Be With You," and then the word "course" even kind of implies learning. And then when the deeper you get into it, you see, oh, my gosh, it's peeling the onion, like the mystics and saints have talked about for many centuries. It's unlearning, it's undoing, it's letting it all dissolve away. So I have found over the years that my initial years with the Course and Revelation and really getting the teachings, the curriculum and the metaphysics kind of really polished was very preliminary. And actually, I would say if somebody asked me what is really, if you could summarize what the Course is meant to help you do, what would that be? And I would say, put you in touch with your internal teacher, with the Holy Spirit or the voice of Jesus. And then once that happens, then actually the book can be laid aside. Because what comes next is, I call it pray, listen, and follow. It's just in following your joy and your inspiration and learning to tune in and not make exceptions to listening to that inner guidance and following that inner guidance. In fact, if you just get good at listening to it, but you don't follow it, then you won't transfer the training, and the ego will try to make some kind of a title or special identity out of being a channeler or a listener or a scribe. You know, even that's just another generated identity. So for me, I started, early on when I was with Jesus in my mind, and I was saying, all right, I've got 10 years of full-time of university, undergrad and grad. I've got all these experiences from my 27 years of on planet Earth and memories, and probably lots of past memories that I've pushed out of awareness to lots of things in there, the unconscious mind. But I'm going to need help to unwind from this. The definition of unconscious is unwatched mind. It's out of awareness. So how do you free yourself from quicksand that you can't even see? It's so deep and so thick, and you can't even perceive it. It's completely out of awareness. It's just pushed out of awareness. At least if you have Houdini and you put handcuffs on him and you drop him to the bottom of a pool, he's dealing with handcuffs and a pool, and he's got to get the handcuffs off and get up to escape and get some air. But no, not the sleeping Son of God. We don't see the handcuffs. We don't see the pool. We just see, for most adults, they would say, well, yeah, there's some really dark things in this world, and there's a lot of ooh la la. And if I say, well, the darkness and the ooh la la are both part of the same system to blind you from the truth and keep you from knowing who you are, whoa, that's pretty big. What? The ooh la la is part of the trick? The pain and the pleasure? Not just the pain, for most human beings, it's obviously trying to avoid the pain and seeking after the pleasure. But Jesus is saying, no, they're both actually the same, because they both reinforce the belief in the body. Pain, definitely, when you have a migraine headache, people would say, yeah, clearly that is reinforcing my body identity. When I scream, I have a splitting headache, I have a migraine. But orgasm is the flip side of it. And people would go, oh, but that there's a big difference between a migraine and an orgasm. And Jesus would say, in purpose, there isn't. They actually serve the same purpose. He says in the Course, it's impossible to seek for pleasure without finding pain. It's a very interesting line. That's a very interesting line from the master metaphysician.
Yeah.
It's impossible to seek for pleasure without finding pain. So that's when we find the rubber meets the road. That's when we get down to the core of, okay, what is this undoing really about?
Mm.
And many people, Jesus tells us in the workbook, many have tried to renounce the world while still believing in it.
Right.
And they have suffered still.
Mm-hmm.
So we know if we study spirituality and we study all the ashrams and all the mystics and saints throughout the centuries that have gone for the goal of God, they have had to face repression, denial. They have had to go through things of doing things to their body, trying to renounce things. Don't look at this, don't look at that, don't do this, don't do that. A whole list of do's and don'ts, probably from their priest or their mother superior or whatever, and they're trying to do all the do's and avoid all the don'ts, and yet still feeling guilty. So this trick of this world of remembering the past and projecting an imaginary future is quite the trap for the mind. And that's why what we would call waking up. There was a song called "Waking Up is Hard to Do." The reason Jesus says is the reason it seems hard is because it would take a miracle to intercede between these thoughts and tricks of the ego to free your mind completely from linear time and space, from the whole cosmos. So we have a book called A Course in Miracles, and that's exactly what he's giving us. He's saying, yes, you need miracles. Miracles are natural. When they don't occur, something's gone wrong. Every day should be devoted to miracles. And so here I am in my early 30s thinking, great, I was raised Christian, and now I'm here. I've been chosen by Jesus to be a miracle worker. Wow, mom and dad did not prepare me for that. In fact, the Sunday school teachers, all my Bible school in summer, nothing prepared me for this kind of awareness that you're to be a miracle worker. Wow. For most people, they say, what? What does that even mean? What do you do for a living? Miracle worker. What? Is that even a vocation? Jesus is saying, yeah. Healing and miracles is your only vocation. The rest are not important. And healing and miracles is the vocation. So it took a while, because initially you get enthusiastic, you get excited, you're having these fast kind of experiences, and then who are you going to talk to about? You tell mom and dad, and they change the subject, and it's a nice day, or maybe fun tomorrow, or what's the sports team, what the Reds have done, and what's the sports score and everything. Change the subject, look away. Clearly, don't tell me about those miracles, and don't even try to tell me that my son is going to be a miracle worker after everything we raised you with and all those years of university. Oh my God, you're going to piss it all away to be a miracle worker. God help us. So you have to face that. And then as you go and enter into the things that are part of a prearranged plan, I remember I was so shy all the way through high school and through university that I had my first girlfriend when I was in graduate school, in graduate school, in school psychology. And who does Jesus bring to me as a helpful kind of a booster rocket to wake me up is a fundamental Christian girlfriend. That's the humor of Jesus. Yeah, he's like, Christian, huh? Okay, we'll see. Let's see how Christ-like you are in facing some fire and damnation theology. Let's just see how sparkly You are. Can you overlook magic thoughts? Are you willing to overlook magic thoughts? So I can see it now. It's more of a comical kind of a journey, but it involved a huge amount of intensity of just praying and saying, I allow it up into awareness. I allow it. It took years and years and years before I even could begin to start to say, this is honestly happening for me. It's not happening to me. It's actually happening for my awakening, for my acceptance of the atonement, for my good. It's working together, because the tendency is to label and dismiss, label something and get it out of here. Get as far away from it as you can. Not, oh my gosh, this is my unconscious mind, my thoughts coming up and my beliefs getting exposed. That's really what was happening. But it took me on a journey of experiential pray, listen, and follow that had seemingly many twists and turns, many ecstasy points, and many devastation points where it felt like everything was completely wiped away. Like I was on ground zero, like I was just down on my knees, like, oh my gosh, it feels like it's all crashing down, it's all falling apart. And even last night, I had a friend of mine that they're really sincerely, deeply into this, and they were guided, they're in Brazil, but they were guided to go take a trip to a desert. And when this couple went to the desert, they just messaged me, WhatsApp me saying, oh my God, the wife was seeing a lot of symbols, so was the husband, but the husband kind of got catapulted into a euphoric state with Jesus. And the wife went down into the darkest fear of feeling like the whole world was ending. And so the wife typed me out a pretty long WhatsApp message. And then last night, I saw her online, so I called them and had a beautiful chat with them. And it's almost like, sometimes it feels like you're on a bucking bronco psychically, like you're just at the rodeo and they've just put you on the bronco and it's kicking, and this huge bull is jumping around and this little body is flopping on the top. And so I do feel that we all kind of come into what we're ready for. And then the more willing we are to stay with it, then we kind of go through doorways, and then we go through another doorway and another doorway, almost like a Steven Spielberg movie, going down Raiders of the Lost Ark or something. It starts to feel like your life is Raiders of the Lost Ark. And wait a minute, how did I get to be Harrison Ford? And this is pretty extreme. I mean, if I ever wrote a book, it would be probably like an encyclopedia, actually, of all the experiences I had. One time when I was pretty new at the course, I actually was doing like a job training program where I was like a program manager, and I would work with a client, a young adult client, for vocational training. And one of them, I was training this young man named Richard, and he was working as a busboy at a restaurant. So I was going there and coaching him and talking to him and working with him and helping doing the busing and everything. Well, I was pretty new to the course, I don't know, some years into it, and I'm just there doing my job, and then I happen to notice it's Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th. I was not a big fan of like Friday the 13th movies, and I'm not, into the horror genre and all that stuff. I'm just there doing my course, practicing my course lessons, doing my job, case manager and everything. So it's a Friday the 13th, and then I don't know. Then people are telling me it's a full moon. Okay, all right, the full moon. Okay, nice symbol, Friday the 13th. Then Richard, he's only 18 years old, but he starts doing things. His behavior starts to get wilder, and people that he's working with in the restaurant, or in the, doing, he's bussing the waitresses, the people in the back cooking, they think they're coming to me, and they're like, they're all spooked. They're turning, their faces are turning white, and they're coming to me. I'm the coach. I'm the coach of the one. They're going, his behavior is really crazy and everything. So I finally I thought, oh, okay, so I'm going to sit down and have a talk with him. So I called him aside. I sat down and talked with him. He had some kind of a weird thing going on in his eyes. And I was just looking into his eyes, talking to him, and he just had a big smile on his face with this weird thing going on in his eyes. And then I was saying, well, maybe we should just pray together and everything. And then the next thing I know, he was looking at me and he was going, just who do you think you are? This voice went down like 3 octaves.
Wow.
And I'm not even consciously believing in a lot of these symbols or exorcisms and possessions and all these things. I didn't come across anything of that in my Christian church or any of my 10 years of university. I came across nothing like that. Mm-hmm. And then when he said, and just who do you think you are? And I said, I'm David Hoffmeister. And it said, and proud of it. And it was like I was facing it was a kind of a bizarre thing where in the end, some of the people called the police, and they came and they put this young man in strapped him up into kind of a straitjacket and put him on a stretcher and took him off to a mental ward, I think. But I remember coming home at night and just sitting there and praying with Jesus, and I'd say, this is a little steep. This is a little steep, but nothing is really steep. I mean, considering the way I kind of was taken in with the Course so quickly, and it was almost like, yeah, you have to transcend fear. And I said, what was that? What was I witnessing? What was this? Was this a demonic possession, or what was it that was actually going on? Mm-hmm. And Jesus just said, I'm just showing you a map of your consciousness. Mm-hmm. I'm showing you a map of your own mind. Mm-hmm. Oh, that was humbling. That was really humbling, because there was nothing conscious for me about that. But I thought, wow, he's just asking me to join with him in a deep way, like a deeply connected way, to transcend fear, transcend all fear, transcend all beliefs, and including whatever seems to be projected, to not he was just giving me instruction that night. He said, no, you're not afraid because of what happened. You're afraid because of your interpretation of what happened. And we need to work on this interpretation. You need to see this world with the Holy Spirit. And I was like, whoa, this is deep stuff. Because that was early on with the Course. I was like, well, I hope other Course students don't get experience like this. My God, it's going to be hard to hang with that book if they go through things like this. But
yeah, if you had the Course for 5 years, yeah. Oh yeah, I had it 5 years. Oh, you'll get your demonic experience in about 6 months then.
Right. Yeah. That's what? They close the book, right? That's the end of that. So, I feel like what it has been, though, is then after I stepped out of university, after those 10 years of university, and then I was really pouring myself into the Course and everything, I kept saying, I have no idea. And basically Jesus was just saying, give me your life, give me your life. I'm your teacher, give me your life. Just say yes. Okay, what does it yes involve? Well, give me your future. Give me your future ambitions, your future desires, your future goals. Give me your mind. Give me access to your mind. Almost like in the early days of computers, where we'd have to go through a total reset or a total clean disk of the entire hard drive. Get the whole thing clean. A wipe disk, I think, was back in the MS-DOS days. That dates me. It's way old. wipe disk was the command where you wipe out the hard drive. And Jesus was really kind of saying, give me your mind so I can do a wipe disk on everything. So I did say yes. And then what happened after that was when I started to get, Jesus jumped right in. As soon as I said yes, he was the instructor. He was the one giving the instructions. I was the one following. He was the one giving the directions. I was the one following, meaning the mind, the sleeping mind. And I had to say, okay, I'm going to give my mind over to you for Christ's control, and then just go on the adventure with you. Well, the first thing he did was he said, well, we're going traveling. And I'm like, he knew I didn't really enjoy traveling. So I was like, ooh, that's going to be interesting. And exactly how are we going to go traveling? Where's the money going to come from? I don't really have savings. I don't have any kind of church support. I have no backers, no investors in this and this. It's interesting to travel. I said, it's the United States of America. This is not Galilee. And I said, I cannot go into my parents' backyard and just start picking $100 bills off of the tree in the back. And he's like, yeah, I know what you believe. And I'll work with that. I'll work with what you believe, and I'll show the way. So we're going to go traveling. At first I thought, how am I going to travel? I'm going to be like Peace Program and just go out walking and everything. No. He guided me to a car dealership. I got a little 3-cylinder hatchback car that had Spirit on it. It's literally the name. The model of the car was Spirit, and it was gold. Wow. 3 cylinders. I said, how many miles to gallon does this thing get? And he said, it will run on fumes. God. So if the United States is a big country, lots of interstates, lots of highways, and then off I go. And then that was part of learning divine providence. It was one thing to leave university behind and leave career goals and all the stuff that we're taught, to be successful human beings. I had to kind of give all that to him. In fact, early on, back in the day, we didn't have computers and smartphones, but there was just the electronic word processors. So I had cultivated my resume on this very introductory word processor, nothing like the computers of today, but I would work on it and save it. And then after I had said yes to Jesus, he said, oh yeah, by the way, go to the word processor. I said, great. What am I going to do with this? He said, press the delete button. And I said, do you know how long I've worked to mold and shape this thing? And that was the first instruction, was delete it from the memory. Throw away the paper copies and
forget this resume.
Forget this resume, And I was like, ooh, okay, what a ride we're on. I said, I don't know how I'm going to get a job without a resume. And he was like, yeah, I'll arrange everything. I told you, if you'll be a miracle worker for me, I will arrange all the rest. I will take care of everything else. You make one commitment. You say yes to my call to you to be a miracle worker, my invitation, and then I take care of the rest. He's like, good deal. All you have to do is say yes, you don't even have to sign on the dotted line, just a big, full, honest, sincere yes, and I take care of the rest for the rest of your days. Wow, that's pretty strong. So, but that's what happened. And then going on the road, things started coming to me. And the biggest problem I had at the beginning was I was refusing things. People would offer me things. I'd say, oh, no, I couldn't. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I offer this. No, thank you. No, I couldn't. And then that went on for a little while. And then Jesus was like, would you stop that? That's me. That's me taking care of you. And you using your persona, your mask, to turn it down out of false humility or whatever you want to call it. That's not the way it works. I said yes. Okay, he said, I'll take care of you. And when I send people to invite you into their homes, to give you money for gas, to shower their love and support upon you, that's me in different forms. But that's the divine spirit taking care of you, making sure you won't have any stones to trip on and no obstacles to bar the way. So that was probably over 3 decades ago when that was happening. And then when you get into it, you start to even find more and more that it's all about expanding your faith, deepening your trust. It's about letting go of your past learning. So I had so many situations where I was tempted to try to bring something from the past up, to solve it or to help decide it.
Yeah.
And then he would just say, no, stop, pause a minute, just wait a moment. And then the way things got handled, it was totally amazing to me, because it didn't involve my past learning. It just involved the use of my past learning in kind of a way that I was not familiar with. It wasn't my pattern or wasn't my style, wasn't my style to ask for things. I was raised, as a Christian, and with the work ethic. The work ethic, you don't really ask for things. You work, you save, you buy, you make your way. And this was more, you trust, you listen, you follow, and you show up to try to be the light of the world, or let the light of the world come through you, and then you let everything else be orchestrated in the entire situation. And that's not the way we're trained. We're trained to break things apart, compartmentalize everything. Where do I need my energy? What do I need to do to succeed? A and B and C. So for those that really go for the course, really to say, I want to learn this course, and like he says, you'll believe this course entirely or not at all. And you go, I'll take entirely. I don't think I'm going to put all this energy into not at all. I'll take entirely for $100. That's the one I'm going for. Then you start to really face the obstacles in your mind. Where are the pockets of fear? Where are the doubts? Where are the insecurities? And then you start to learn lesson 50. I am sustained by the love of God. He literally lays it out in lesson 50 and lesson 76, where your false beliefs are giving you a false sense of security and a false sense of sustenance. So it's good. I would say to anybody, it's like, you don't know it at the beginning, but you're diving into the deep end, and you're going on a very deep journey. If you choose, the time you take it is voluntary. If you choose to really go with it, it will all just come to you at the perfect appointed time for what you are willing to accept. And if you don't, then it's like there's no coercion. It's like if somebody says to me, it's kind of like the Matrix, the first Matrix movie, where Neo gets up onto the high rise, and he just says the words, "I can't do this." Literally, the phone he's talking to Morpheus with blows out of his hand, symbolically breaking the connection with his teacher. And then he says, I can't do this. And then he's taken by the agents. And we all have gone through those experiences where we just, somewhere inside we go, I can't do this. And we seem to be taken away by the agents of the world, only to recover and come back and say, okay, here I am, Lord. Let's give this another go.
Absolutely beautiful. Yeah, I'm interested. I'm thinking about some of the rules for decision whilst listening to you talking there, and I'm thinking about, your major problem now is you still make up your mind and then ask what to do. And something that you and I were talking about prior to pressing record about decisions are continuous, and decisions cause results because they're not made in isolation. And the beautiful thing, or one of the many beautiful things about the course, is this exposure. You know, when you're talking about unconscious thinking and awareness, unawareness, sort of unconscious thought relies upon unawareness for it to be perpetuated. And the way that the course uncovers everything for us and shows it to us in the gentlest way. And obviously, there's such upbeat joy to your storytelling that it makes me connect with how much I'm made to laugh probably every day when I'm reading the course or thinking about the course, because so much of it is funny. And think recently, you're not special. So, for example, you're not special, and you know that this has been said to you by the kindest, gentlest, most beautiful, loving human being. Sorry, nearly said human.
Formerly human, and now divine being.
Yeah, my elder brother outside of the tree. So, you know, then I tried to think of a context in which I could picture myself saying to somebody, "You're not special." You know, because normally you'd hear someone go, "You're not special. You're not special." There's all these points of
Yeah.
expression, and somewhere in that spectrum, from what seems to be this end to that end, there's this place of utter beautiful kindness with a slight smirk of like, "You're
Yeah.
not special."
Yeah.
And one day listening to Ken Wapnick, and he said, you know, special is the same as saying separate. And then I had this like light bulb moment. I thought, oh, okay. So if I was to then say, "You're not separate," it's very, very easy to find that spot in the spectrum where it's just coming from pure kindness to say, you're not separate, you're not special. And our unconscious thoughts, the places that aren't apparent to us immediately, the course shows us that we see that in the world. It's projected outward onto the blank screen. The world of itself doesn't exist. There is no world. It's just a mirror that reflects back our inward condition. And the stuff that we can't access and get to, I've used an analogy recently of saying to people like, imagine you're in a beautiful lake somewhere and the water is just so still, and you're sitting in a rowing boat, and in your hand you have a bread roll. And when you drop the bread roll into the water, it's got a little bit of time before it absorbs water and sinks out of your reach. So initially you could lean over the boat and you could pick the bread roll out, but once it's gone out of your reach, it's gone down into the depths. And then you can't access it like you can your conscious thoughts because they're present and close to our awareness. So then they become presented to us in the things that, as the great word people like to use, trigger these days, isn't it? You then see somebody behave in a way, and you're sort of triggered by this behavior, and it causes a reaction in you, but there is no other, there is no world, it's only your thoughts projected out. And this unconscious thought that you can't grasp straight away is now being presented to you in the behavior of another person. And therefore, when you start to decipher why it is that they might be someone who slurps a drink in public,
Mhm.
you're like, oh, how could you slurp a drink in public? And then when you actually stop and think about why that even matters to you, you realize that when you were a child, maybe there was an adult who went, wait, don't slurp your drink, and put this thought into your head that it matters how you drink and what noise you make. And for all of the profound things that you're able to read in the world, in all of these different thought systems and stuff that's blown my mind in all sorts of fields. I know you and I share interests in quantum physics and quantum mechanics, and there's all the different thought systems, even though the course is the one personally that speaks to us. My favorite saying of all time from the course is, or from anything, is recognize what doesn't matter. And really, your favorite saying of all time, what's it going to be? And you sit back ready to recite some big poetic, metaphorical kind of statement that takes somebody to this imagining of like, wow, I can see why that speaks to you and why it's so deep. But when I hear recognize what doesn't matter, and that just is so arresting, and it brings me to a halt, because I know that when he said recognize what doesn't matter, the way that I recognize what doesn't matter is I also have to turn that over and recognize what does matter to recognize what doesn't matter. And that is so characteristic of this system. And also it changes your vocabulary. I find myself starting to write a message to someone and say, oh, thank you so much. And I'm like, there's no degrees. I'm like, yeah, okay, delete, thank you. Oh, I'm really, really, really happy. It's like, I'm happy. And there's a real simplification that comes from exposing the complication of the ego and helping you to see that circuitous, busybody sort of kind of thinking, which is just trying to draw you out into the world to make you think that all this stuff is actually real. And it just strips so much back to a simple choice all the time between love and fear, or heaven and hell, or judgment and forgiveness. But interestingly, again, recently, as I said to you, I was interested with the form thoughts, excuse the pun, and awareness being formless, and anything to do with form is something that just doesn't register with God. God doesn't know what form is, the changeless reality. And equally, on contemplation on forgiveness lately, and when you think about Course in Miracles definition of forgiveness, and it's saying to us, forgiveness sits and waits, it quietly does nothing, it judges not. And that dawned on me in a new sense of like, well, you're actually describing nothing. It's like forgiveness sits and waits, so what, it does nothing. So therefore, in this same thing with recognize what doesn't matter, to turn the flip side, then we know that the opposite of forgiveness is judgment. And judgment is very active, isn't it? It's a very it's an investor. You lean into a series of thoughts whereby at the end of it, you can rub your hands and rub a stamp and go, yep, judged, guilty, And as we know from the manual for the teachers, how is judgment relinquished? It's like explained to us to withdraw ourselves from engaging in this activity, which the counterpoint to the activity is non-activity. When you actually think, what is forgiveness? It's to not judge. So therefore, of itself, we'll be told by Jesus that it's still a form of perception. There's no forgiveness in heaven, but it's the purest form of perception, because it's to gain and to grow, whereas the other perceptions are to reinforce the wall around the separate self.
Yeah, it does. Forgiveness in those terms has kind of a passive feel, very passive.
Yes. Yeah.
And where we look at things like when Jesus talks about ego dynamics, and he puts dynamics in quotes, because he says they're really not real dynamics. How can what doesn't exist have dynamics?
Yeah.
He's so good at poking a hole in what seems to be some complex thing. I think, like he did mention to Helen Schuckman and Bill Thetford, that psychologists have from their profession and working with clients, they have a bit of an experiential grasp of what projection is. Mm-hmm. Wherever, garbage collectors and construction workers, projection, what the hell? They're not familiar with the idea of trying to put the blame on every day, watching clients try to put the blame or play the victim or look for an external cause. And hope that the therapist will agree with them that there is an external cause and that's not the purpose. But I think, I know how you like quantum physics and everything. I try to just use all kind of different cultural symbols from many different things, including, music, art, movies, quantum physics. I've done a lot of teaching through movies where I'll just take the things. I'll take a Shakespeare movie and I will take it straight through with all the amazing reflections of truth that came through Shakespeare. Or Sir Isaac Newton, since you're there in England, let's talk about Sir Isaac Newton and Newtonian view of the world, Newtonian physics, and so forth. And then I did a movie called Einstein and Eddington, where Eddington is the great scientist that comes along generations after Sir Isaac Newton, takes the same position in the same university that Newton had, and then has that bit of openness, though. He's a scientist to the core. He wants to know, comes in contact with the writings of Einstein, when Einstein's at the very beginning, working on his theory of relativity, looking at gravity. How does gravity play into this whole time-space cosmos thing? And then between it, a war breaks out, and England and Germany are on the opposite side. And Eddington's told, don't dare communicate with Einstein. Einstein's told, don't dare communicate with Eddington. And yet, for the pursuit of truth, they come together, and Einstein is helped by Eddington, and Eddington is helped by Einstein. And what they basically come up with is that, whereas Newton said that time and space and the cosmos and the gravity and the spheres and the movements of spheres and all that were absolutes that were created by God, here come our modern day quantum scientists to begin to poke a hole in that God created these things as absolutes and start to show that it's all relative. And imagine if someone in spirituality could go inside and start to begin to have a glimmer of awareness that everything perceived is entirely relative. That, as Jesus says in the Course, time and space are the same error. It just seems to take on different forms, different dimensions, but it's not. Well, then it starts to unravel this whole thing of judgment, as if judgment isn't something that is set, that you have to kind of figure out how to extract yourself out of. But you start to realize the relative nature of it, and then you start to get the context that God didn't create judgment in the first place. And sometimes people will say, David, Jesus said, judge not. And I know that he says that in the Course, and I'm having a hell of a time stopping the judgments. And I will give them a question. It's like with Jesus, they say to Jesus, how will the world end? And he answers the question with a question. He says, can what has no beginning really have an end? So when they say to me, how do you stop judging? How do you stop judging? Please tell me, teach me how to stop judging. I say, well, how do you stop a runaway freight train that's going down a mountain? And they're like, yeah, exactly. How do you stop a runaway freight train? You're describing my mind to me, a runaway freight train that's just going down, and it's off the tracks, it's loose. And I said, you don't stop it. You have to come to a realization that is beyond the freight train, beyond the judgment. You have to come into a pristine state of awareness that is aware that there is no judgment. It's prior to judgment. It's the I am presence. It's prior to the judgment. You can't stop something that never was really there. So, and it's very frustrating to try to stop something. Then they say, well, okay, give me something practical, though. How would I even begin to see that there's no freight train? A desert is a desert, and what do you do with the desert? You leave. How do you leave a runaway train? And I say, well, that's my favorite topic of all time. You're asking me my favorite question, my favorite topic of all time, which is guidance. Yes. Because I'm a big proponent of teaching about guidance, of giving parables of guidance, of using examples of guidance, of inspiring people to believe that they can be guided intuitively, that they can live their life 100% intuitively and 0% analytically. And they're like, how? Because even a lot of amazing non-dual pathways to God oftentimes don't have the guidance component. You know, that's where you get the Aveda shuffle, and you get all kinds of crazy kind of wisdom and things that come in because the practicality of guidance, like in any given moment, the Holy Spirit can guide you what to say and what to do. Like that prayer at the beginning, I'm here only to be truly helpful. I'm here to represent him who sent me. That's a prayer of guidance. It's a prayer of inviting guidance. And even for those who work with the Course, very strict, like very hardcore metaphysicians that haven't actually experienced the guidance themselves, then they can dismiss it as the Holy Spirit doesn't really guide. Of course, in the ultimate sense, yes, there's no world happening, so there's no guidance happening, but going into the experience of joy requires coming so close to the Holy Spirit, and that means merging with the guidance. That's what Rules for Decision is all about. It's literally saying you can be guided, decide the kind of day that you want, and then say to yourself, if I make no decisions by myself, this is the day that will be given me. That's an instruction manual on guidance. So I find that that's probably, for those that are really intellectual with the Course, and they're known and famous for their great metaphysics and everything, but if they haven't got into the practical application of pray, listen, and follow, of really embracing and taking the path of guidance, like literally saying, Jesus, I say yes to you. I'm not going to even try to prove your existence or disprove it. I know you're there. I feel you. I feel the connection, and I will say yes to you, and I will give you my life, so to speak, my future. And then I'm going to trust that you can do with whatever I believe in consciousness, you can undo it. So to me, that's really where the rubber meets the road. That's why I have done 4-week retreats. I've done 6-week retreats. I've had people who have come to a 6-week retreat of mine, and they've come and literally, we find out fairly soon, they've been diagnosed with cancer, and they've come with cancer. And then after the 6-week retreat, they're in remission from the cancer, or other kind of extreme cases where the focus is so much on the contents of consciousness. Let's take it back. Let's go really deep inside and go even beyond the specific guidance to the purpose. What is the purpose in the mind, the Holy Spirit, that will set me free? Let's go meet that purpose. Let's go discern that purpose. Let's see how important the discernment between the right mind and the wrong mind really is. Because in the end, if I'm going to accept the atonement, it must mean I'm going to accept the realization that my mind holds only what I think with God, and the right mind has been the only viable choice that there ever was. That even this construct and metaphor of right mind, wrong mind, well, it's meant to be transcended. You can't split your feet on different tracks, and if the tracks get farther apart, you end up doing the splits, or you hop off of one track and embrace the one that's the real alternative, the actual real alternative. So to me, that's the most important thing, is the Course is to be experienced. The Course is to be lived. Even with Jesus, he says a couple times, forgive me your illusions, and people have trouble with that too. They write to me, why do I have to forgive Jesus? I can see my mom, my dad, my aunt, my uncle, my brothers, my sisters, my teachers. Why do I have to forgive Jesus? And I'm like, well, in the end, you have to forgive the man, forgive the apostles, forgive Mary Magdalene, forgive the timeline. Let's just say, let's forgive the timeline and go for the holy instant, which is actually what the Course is asking us to do, not to make, this one, that one. I mean, I think they're all beautiful books. The Lifetimes When Jesus Knew Buddha. Okay, good. But we have to go beyond that. We have to go to the holy instant if we're going to find the joy, consistent joy. It can only be found in the present moment, is what I'm always sharing.
Yeah.
We have to become disinterested in the things of the past and the things of the future. Atonement is total escape from the past and a total lack of interest in the future. Right. Now, that to me is joyful. That's a description from Jesus that I can dive into, into the joy, the glee, the happiness of the moment, and it's so simple. Really, when you think of it, it can't get any simpler than now.
No, beautifully expressed as always, and it makes me think of the conversation you were having with Carol Howe, and you were talking about the addiction to linear time, and what you've just expressed there is essentially the undoing of the addiction to linear time. But as we know, it's still, like you said with the freight train, it's still all playing out. It's still all going on, but you're just watching it, not being invested in it, not being consumed by it. You're going, oh,
not on that train. Missed that train.
Amazing. And it's interesting that you should, well, it's not interesting, it's not surprising at all. None of it's at random. Our day's not at random, but to mention Einstein and relativity and Arthur Eddington, relationship being, again, it's another part of the language of the Course in Miracles, and Jesus presents us with thoughts and concepts temporarily to get beyond thoughts and concepts. But relationship, again, it's like form for me. It's like it starts off with a very go-to, almost literal kind of interpretation. First thing might be my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my mum, my friend, my relation. Then you think my relationship with my dog, my house, my car, my guitar collection, my music, my books. And the constant in all of these things is relationship, and relationships coming from a dual sense of like me and it. Whereas in the reality of the one interconnectedness of the nature of how we truly exist, relationship is with my mind, and relationship with my mind is the constant that all of these apparent fluctuations are played out in. And that comes back to, again, the form thing that I was asking you about earlier, where you feel yourself drop into a thought form, and then you pull back, and then you drop into one in the past, and then one into, and that constant thing of decisions being continuous. If you are invested in it thoroughly and fully, you can see why it's so exhausting, because to step back and watch the ego go and say things, and for me there's like a comical aspect of, like, if I hear ego dialogue during the day, it normally coincides with the fact that I probably need to eat something and I've got a bit hungry. I remember saying before that I was talking to somebody about having been to see a therapist many years ago, and we were talking about the deep stuff and this, that, and the other. And when I told him about the situation, he said, it might just be that you're a bit hungry, and it really made me laugh, because it's like you could get all of the books out and start studying all this.
I get to the bottom.
Go and eat something.
You're a bit hungry.
And sure enough, now I observe that in myself over the last few years or whatnot. and I'll hear that voice chirp in, and instead of like feeling entwined with it or enmeshed with it, it's almost like that's funny. It's funny because it's so vicious, or it's so anti-love, isn't it? And it's like, whoa, what a party pooper. But that,
Yeah,
the relationship is the relationship with our awareness, and how that drops into perception projected, or as you're saying, like the knowing of, like, knowing that knowledge, even with the presence of Jesus in your life, with knowing that once you make that decision to say yes, it's like explained to us that, could you possibly know how everything played out, a to make an informed and precise judgment call, as it's explained to us in the literature. It's like you'd have to know everything that could ever happen as of that one moment, in that way, this way, that. Can you do that? And you're like, no. So therefore, it's not down to you, is it? You're not you're not qualified. So if you step back, of myself I can do nothing, however you want to word it, and make that invitation to come in and guide you, then you can maximize the miracle's potential, can't you? To sort of reach as well, to reach beyond what you can possibly conceive of at the moment. It's like I could smile at you in the street as a stranger for no reason. That could then inspire you to open a shop door for somebody. They could walk in and go, oh, thank you. And then they might be kinder to the person behind the counter. Then that person receives a phone call. We don't see all of that. I just smiled to you in the
yeah,
street. But
yeah. Says that like a ripple
yeah.
effect when you throw a pond, a stone into a pond. And there's something, because we've been so accustomed to form, form is like the fish in the water. The fish just, it takes the water for granted. And the human being takes the form for granted. But then when we are inspired, like you said, there's that word inspired, then something shifts in that's really a huge shift. Like I remember the first time I watched the movie Gandhi, I just had to keep watching it and pausing it. And then I later on heard Einstein made a quote, in generations to come, scarcely will anyone believe that a man walked this earth in flesh and blood, like Gandhi. Einstein was blown away. I was blown away. Even when I watched that Einstein and Eddington movie, I knew a bit about Einstein, a bit about Eddington, but I could just watching their actions, Einstein left Germany, went to Austria because he felt he needed to do that to pursue truth. He left his whole country behind. And there was just the Oppenheimer movie that was just out toward the end of that. Oppenheimer was kind of wondering because everybody seemed to be turning on him. And Einstein just said, yeah, I had to leave my country and you have to do what you have to do. That impressed me initially. Also, when the Nazis began to start to use science to make poison gas, how upset Einstein was. Like, what? That's not the purpose of science. That's not the purpose of science. That impresses me. Or Eddington, when Germany and England go to war and then they're rounding up German families in England, just like the United States rounded up Japanese families in World War II with like their own version of concentration camps and so forth. And then Eddington and his family, they took in a German family at the time when it was the most unpopular thing to do. That tells me a lot. So I think it's we can be inspired by things we perceive and things we see, and it's almost like when we're inspired, something lights up in our heart, like something is saying yes. We may not even know what we're saying yes to. We may be just saying yes to kindness, saying yes to goodness, saying yes to honesty. Something inside of us starts to awaken, to light up. And I love that the final stage of all the characteristics of teacher of God, the final characteristic is open-mindedness. Is just, that to me is non-judgment.
Yeah.
If I can be open-minded and have a heart-to-heart talk with anyone, regardless of what their position or stature seems to be, why would position, stature, even intelligence, why would it matter when you can gaze into someone's eyes and see the sparkle, and it puts a smile on your face and you feel a connection? Something like that is so powerful that it can change our entire perception, or at least it's the beginning of a total transformation of perception. So to me, that's exciting. That's how we're touched by the ones we meet, even if we just see them in a movie. I mean, I never personally met Einstein or Eddington, but I was in Florida at Cape Canaveral, where they were shooting off Elon Musk's rockets, and I just did a movie gathering on a Saturday workshop.
Nice.
And everybody was like, "Wow, you're just all juiced up. You're kind of animated, David." And I said, "Yeah, this is the realization of Einstein and Eddington coming together to really kind of find the proof that it's all relative and it's not God-given at all. It's actually relative, which is much more in line with illusion. Absolute truth, relative illusions. I'm like, that was the whole point for me of the whole movie.
Yeah.
Was like, oh, that is for the whole universe. That's a realization for the whole universe. That's something I get really excited about. And then people say, but how does that apply to your life? And it changes everything. If it's all relative, why am I going to feel guilt about the relative? When I'd rather know the absolute, and be in touch with the absolute. That to me is important. It's no small matter.
So how would you say to somebody about directing prayer? So, from a course understanding, from your course understanding, knowing that God isn't aware of what's going on in the world and wanting to communicate with our elder brother outside the dream, with the understanding that there's like an intermediary kind of space between wherever Jesus is positioned and heaven. And if God's not aware of what's going on here, how would you give guidance to somebody who wanted to direct their prayer to God as maybe a gratitude, rather than directing the prayer to Jesus or the Holy Spirit to ask for guidance?
Yeah, to ask or entreat versus just pure gratitude.
Yeah,
I think when Ken and Helen were there, and Ken suspected there was more to prayer, and then had Helen ask for Jesus to give some words on prayer, and then we had the supplement, Song of Prayer.
Yeah,
that's a beautiful. That's the first place I would go if somebody was sincerely interested. Is go see what Jesus has to say in the Song of Prayer. And in there he describes a ladder, where he describes the ladder as all these specifics. And of course, this is a world of specifics. The ego made a world of specifics. And so Jesus is teaching us, you cannot help but pray for specifics while you believe in specifics. Because the prayer is like the power of the mind. But if your mind's believing in specifics, which is what the ego is, then you can't help but ask for that. But he does tell us, when you get to the top of the ladder, kind of like Abraham Maslow, you start off with your basic needs, and let's go up that pyramid. Ooh, self-actualization at the top. What's at the top of Jesus's ladder of prayer but, Father, what is your will for me? Now that is a prayer for the abstract. Yeah. Father, what is your will for me? That is an actual prayer. And he says if you pray it, it will be answered immediately. So So that's pointing us to, like the mystics and saints have said, empty your mind. No wonder we have to empty our mind, because as long as we're desiring things and stuff, even manifesting, I've told students years ago, back in the 1990s, I said, if you want to do a Course in Miracles workshop that will be your least attended workshop ever, just title it. No, don't title it, May the Course be with you. Title it, The Impossibility of Manifesting. That will draw the fewest people. But if you understand what I'm talking about, you will see that ultimately, because God knows not form, and because God's will is for pure happiness, perfect happiness, that's in heaven, then that's the highest prayer, of course. So I think if you start to bring it back, I mean, even the metaphor of the King David in the Bible, the Psalms of the Bible, if you go back, way back to the 23rd Psalm from David, it starts off with, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Ooh, 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 ooh. That is hot. That's a prayer from the 23rd Psalm. My grandmother, Lillian, memorized that. I never memorized the whole thing, but I do remember that first line. I can remember that first line. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And practically speaking, though, that's why we need miracles. We need to be, prayer is our answer, but we must go through purification with the prayer. We have to purify it from all of our specific desires, and then come back to, Father, what is your will for me? Which is a pure prayer, desire to know God. It has to be the desire to know God. Father, what is your will for me? And so I've liked that. That fits into all my talks and teachings on guidance, though, because you can't pray beyond the level of awareness where you're at.
Yeah.
So if you have desires for food, for sex, for climate, temperatures, and different kinds of sensations, even around music or art or anything, then you can't pray beyond the level where you believe you are. The mind is so powerful that if it believes in these things, then that is its prayer. And the prayers are answered with the perception of the world that appears. But I do feel guidance is the way out. That's why the Course is just putting us in touch with our internal teacher. And as soon as we really get in touch with that, we can live an inspired life. We just live from that inspiration. And it does the job of unwinding us from the ego. We don't have to personally figure anything out. In fact, the person can't understand or figure anything out. But I feel like that's just the prayer, to be very highly intuitive, 100% intuitive. And when I say that, people light up and like, that sounds good. And I yeah, it is good. It is really, it's very helpful to have even a faith and a belief that you can be 100% intuitive and not reacting and responding to the images, which is what most human beings are used to.
Surely your journey, as you describe it, your life, your apparent separate personality, to a sense, is a testament to that experience, isn't it?
Yeah, I think when I've talked with Frances about that, she was saying to me that she was like in university 13 years, I think, full time, and I was in there 10 years. So that's a lot of years with university. But when she kind of started tuning in and linking in and listening and following, she said, everything that I wanted in my previous life, my personality self-life, I came to experience, but not in the way that I thought I had to do it. She always thought that when she got to be elderly, she would travel the world, but she had to work for decades to earn, invest, save money, build the big nest egg. And then in the years when the white hair comes, go and travel the world with the means that you've earned through a lifetime of competition and fighting to get the money. So when we started joining and traveling, we had all these miraculous experiences, and there was one point where we went around 360 around the entire globe. We were in a hotel in China, and we were just sitting there looking, and she looked at me and I looked at her, and I said, "Are you feeling what I'm feeling?" And she said, "I think so. Are you feeling what I'm feeling?" And I said, "I think so." And she said, "Okay, I'll do it." And she got out her laptop and she booked. We just finished a world tour. She sat there, and in one day, she followed the guidance of where we would be for the next year. She booked up all the flights for a full flight after we've just done it. And people would say, I mean, even Gary Renard one time said, that's exhausting reading your itinerary. It's absolutely exhausting. Coming from Gary, that's saying something, because he's doing the same thing. But she booked the entire trip around from her laptop, and sure enough, we stepped right into it, and the miracles opened up, and invitations came, and everything to mirror to fit with the flights all came in. Guest hosts, organizers, people showing up, and it was just showing how when you step back and let him lead the way, then you don't have to take thought for anything. She just intuitively felt what I felt, and we both gleefully jumped into another 360 trip around the globe. But we're like two kids playing, like just playing like in a sandbox, enjoying. So that just shows, yeah, that's a testimony right there, that to a very different way of living, that kind of intuitive way of living. And I think we need examples of that. I mean, obviously, we have to be convinced at some point to really give ourselves fully over to the rules for decision. But those kind of parables and those kind of experiences, they showed us that we didn't have to figure it out, that we could just pray and it would kind of get a download. And then that was a download for a 360 trip around the world. That's a big download. That's a lot.
But I think for the rest, for the people who are looking for examples of somebody who's following guidance, then they're going to look, even if they don't know it, there's going to be energetic, sensory kind of feelers coming out that they might not be aware of, which they're listening to words, they're watching somebody's movements, but their actual energetic field of their mind, which is seeking and looking to connect and join the dots, that's looking for an unspoken qualification and an unspoken authenticity. And a phrase that I've come to like is from a question of a lady who does podcasts called Danica Patrick. And she's brilliant. She does these podcasts, pretty intense podcasts. And that's put me on to loads of people over the years. And she's fantastic. And I remember one of her guests, she was talking to him and she said to him, "Do you think truth has a frequency?" And I was just like, wow, because as a musician, some of the topics that I've chosen to express have all come from obviously the truth of my lived experience, and then the catharsis of creating a vehicle for this processing of an event and the emotions and the thoughts. So therefore, when I sit down and perform that music and talk about that subject, which is it needs to be handled really, really gently, some of it, if it's talking about grief and loss, you're going to straight away, if somebody's not coming from an authentic, qualified place where their frequency is in line with truth, someone's just going to be repelled in simple physics or the magnetism, even if they don't realize it. So for somebody to know that, excuse me, that for the past 30 years, you've embraced being guided, which is essentially like thoughts and motivations beyond your own expectation. You know, if you, it's like having a piece of paper and you go, all right, today I'm going to go here, and it's like, no, 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 throw that piece of paper away, and don't even throw away the idea of writing where you think you're going today. Just forget it, pal, we got something else in mind for you. So for
Yeah.
you to live like that for 30 years, and then to still in quite recent history do a whole um, circumnavigation of the globe, and then on the last day the pair of you go, right, again.
Yeah, again, here we go again. Yeah.
Talk
That's the
about
spirit.
demonstrating. To teach is to demonstrate, as the course says to us. It's like, wow, nice.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's it. It is kind of amazing that it's all kind of all it takes is kind of like a real openness and open and ready and willing, and then the miracle comes. It's more like the people don't perform the miracles, the spirit does it through us, but we do give our heart, our mind, we have given alignment. It's like one time Helen Schuckman received a very short 4-word prayer from Jesus for Bill, which I always love. Here I am, Lord. It just boom, boom, brings you right there. Here I am, Lord. And I've followed that. I thought, wow, I really love that. I just want to stay in that, stay in those four-word prayer, stay right there. And then enjoy the ride. I tell people you should have some fun. If you're not having fun, if there's not really lots of fun and laughter in your path, then I would consider changing paths. Because I really think that those are essential, fun and laughter. Because I don't think it's meant to become so serious. If the into eternity we're all as one,
Yeah.
except a tiny mad idea, I wish the Son of God remembered not to laugh. If that's the separation temptation, then the laughter must be the solution.
The huge sane idea, as I like to say to people.
Yes.
And also, I think coming back to like interference, to the awareness of love's eternal presence, coming into trauma, trauma, it's like with the opposite, the block to like the fun and the joy. The fun and the joy is an expression of the fact that you've cleared the decks. You clear the decks by giving up your story. The ego wants you to remember your story, because if you don't, you might just like, what you're going to do, you're going to be in the moment, you're going to be happy and full of joy. And if you're happy and full of joy, then again, things like the definition of forgiveness and not judging, these things, they don't even have a place, because you're just resting in God, you're just in joy. So the ego needs to be going, wait, don't forget this, don't forget that. And intuitively on that level, it makes perfect sense to that kind of thinking to go, oh no, hold on, I need to remember the story of my whole life, because my identity is caught up in all of those terrible events which took me here and took me there. And then when you actually realize that the true meaning of those experiences is to like detach yourself from them and cut the cords and let them go, then letting go of that identity is where you go, oh my goodness me, and the vibe raises, and there's the joy and the light, and you get that fills you up. And then one thing that I love, which is so beautiful about people, is once that trauma is gone, the very next thing that kicks in like that quickly is altruism. It's like, how can I serve? Right,
Yeah.
I went through that, I'm through it, how can I help them? And whether that is to teach, is to demonstrate, is to teach, as Jesus says to us, or whether it is to actively seek out and recognize somebody who's carrying something you used to carry, come to them. I find it has a great effect if you come to them in a state of pure joy, and then they go, oh wow, you've got this great thing going on. And I go, yeah, no, it's lovely. And they'll say, well, what's happened, and then I'll explain that in my personal life, I was born, my dad was a drug dealer. He was a heroin addict for 20 years. He was in and out of prison my whole childhood. The doors were kicked in on our house. We had this happen. We had that. There was like a mountain of trauma with to climb out of and off.
Yeah.
To find the light again so that that light could land on you. But then again, coming full circle to some of the other topics, there's your qualification. That's what makes it authentic. That's where the frequency of truth comes from. So if you do put it into song, if you do put it into words, if you put it into just the simple action of a smile or how you walk down the street, I think when you start to recognize the energy of people, their physical, how they hold themselves as a reflection of where they're at energetically in their mind, and you see people who are slumped and you see people who are carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, you don't even have to be aware of the fact that you might just be walking down the street because you've got this lovely cleansed being. You've done your absolute best to let go of all of the ego identity so that everything can come in and illuminate you. Someone might be driving by in a car that you don't even catch eyes with you, and they, even if they don't know it, they've recognized this energetic level that you are emitting, that you're operating on. And that somewhere is a reminder to their minds. Like recently, I had a prayer come in. I remember thinking, I think I need to jot this one down because it's a good one. And it was along the lines of, I accept the healing light of God into my mind that it may extend to awaken those who think they sleep. So you could be walking down the street in the zone, happy as you should, happy as Larry. We don't know who Larry was, but apparently he was happy. But happy as Larry, walking down the street. Somebody drives by, you make no eye contact, you have no idea. That ripple again, coming back to miracles, expressions of love, that touches somebody in a way, even if they don't realize it, speaks to the true level of their mind, which again comes back to Course in Miracles of Jesus saying, you don't need to believe this workbook, you don't need to believe in God, just try it, just do it, because he knows that he's speaking to our mind. And he's like, say to people, imagine you've got a virtual reality headset on and you think all of this is real, and your elder brother's tapping you on the shoulder going, you're dreaming, you're in a dream,
Yeah.
he knows that he's speaking to our minds. And in that same way, if we live from this place where we've let go of the story because we've disassociated it, because we've picked it apart and cleaned the decks, and then we've got this lovely fresh air about us, somebody asks you, what's your secret? And if you tell them, then they think, oh my goodness me. So it's possible to go through all of that horror, or hell, whatever descriptive term you want to use, come through the other side almost unaffected. You could say unaffected, but actually better for it, and I like to also say to people about the separation as well. If you very early on, when you were talking to me about this held collective sense of guilt that comes back from like the tiny mad idea of like, oh no, I thought I had a thought that I wanted to separate from God and leave God. Oh no, you can actually even turn that on its head and sort of look at that in a positive way and say, what growth, what have we learned from that thought of trying to do something that was impossible. There's nowhere where the Father ends and the Son begins. So, we know it's not possible. But if something of that deep magnitude, on which the whole ego thought system rests, can be looked at in a non-judgmental, loving way, then everything can be looked at like that. And if everything can be looked at like that, it can be let go. It can be looked at with no threat or danger from it, because it has no substance, because we know that it's not love.
Yeah.
That love.
That's that's good. Right on your fingers.
Oh yeah.
That's fantastic. All these years of history of boxers, and you are the booming example of love right on the fingers of the fist. A tattoo, you can't miss it. I
Exactly. And then
love
if
it.
I works, if some children say to me, "Why have you got love tattooed on your hands?" and I'll sort of say to them, "Well, if you can find something that's more important and more valuable than love in the world, I'd be interested to know what it is."
Mm.
And just leave
Beautiful.
them with that. And then I know later on they'll go and say, "Mum, why?" Anyway. So, well,
I love
what a
it. Love it.
beautiful conversation. You're
Yeah.
such a joy. I'm so thankful to
I'm
spend.
so grateful too that your podcast has such a beautiful name, and we've lived up to the namesake. That's the way we live our life. May the course be with us.
So, you're going to have a little bit more time to just take it easy before the next retreat. You've got that's in a couple of weeks, is that right?
Yeah, it's a couple of weeks. I head out there for that, and we'll be doing that, and then yeah, little pause in a couple days, and then down to Mexico for what who knows what Jesus has got in store, but it's it's going to be fun.
Of course it is, because you're going to be
Yeah, I'm going to bring the fun. Instead of BYOB, bring your own F fun.
there.
Bring your own fun with the spirit.
So when in your in our household, you're known as the Hoff. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, like David Hasselhoff has this
Yes.
the Hoff, yeah. But
Yeah.
obviously I had to get in touch with his people on your behalf and explain to his team that there was no chance you were going to get a wig and a leather jacket anytime soon. Tread on his toes. Don't worry.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. That's it.
So thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of the day and safe journeys on these coming retreats. And just please keep being you and doing what you're doing. And I'm really pleased that your life is taking the direction that it has, so that you can enjoy the blessed and simple experiences as well, because we've all got 30 years of gratitude to extend your way
Yeah.
for your service as an
Um,
ambassador of this beautiful system.
yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me. That always is the thing for me. If an invitation comes in, I just pray and whoosh, then there it goes. And what a beautiful, joyful collaboration
Mm.
for the spirit. I love it. I love that word, collaboration. So I feel like that's what we had here. What a blessing.
Thank you so much.
Yay.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.